This is how I draw and color hair. I'll be breaking down the parts of the hair, which is the hairline, hair part, flow, front end, back end, sections, and hair ends. Okay, that's a lot. Chronicle 1. Before you draw hair, there are things you need to try to master first. People overlook the most important part, which is the skull. There's no proper way of drawing the skull, but the way I do it is by using 2 circles. The purpose of this is to add volume on the back of the head because they tend to look flat if you just use one. Number 2 is line confidence. Usually people say draw hair with shapes, which is true, but do you really know how to draw shapes? I strongly believe that any shape can be made with straight lines. Look at this circle for example. Instead of focusing on the curve of the hair, I want you to focus more on the vibe of the hair. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Instead of tracing the outline with one big line, I'd suggest using smaller lines to create that shape. Next, to draw the shape of the hair, simplify. Don't stress out on every curve, every crevice. Only once that you have the Roblox version, you can use the magical whimsical tool called the eraser. Erase the edges, like how the government erases the country's history from its people. To learn about the shape of the hair, you can use another tip I called spilled ink, where you spill ink, then use the eraser to carve the sides. To erase, just remove some of the chunks to show some of the curves, then go back with a solid brush and outline it to add more edge. Now that we've learned the 3 tips, time for the actual hair. First, we got the hairline. It's just a map of where all the strands of hair connect to the skull. Next is the hair part. This is the hairline where your hair parts. Usually it's a line or just a dot wherever the hair gathers, but parts don't apply to all hair. For example, a slick back, all the hair gathers from the front hairline, and locks stem from all over the head and not just from one specific place. Next is the flow. Now this dictates where the wind is. Just map out where you want your hair to flow. Okay, for front hair, let's talk about bangs. There are 2 types of bangs, the barcode and the crater. Let me explain. The barcode is a barcode and the crater has a crater. To make the bangs look natural and not just an amalgamation of your worst nightmares, use what you learned about the hair part. When drawing the barcode, try to gather the bangs to one spot. For the crater on the other hand, the part starts where the crater starts. Now for the back hair. The difference between short hair and long hair is that short hair either has nothing peeking in the back or just a little bit, and long hair is just that but longer. So now we have the main shapes, but what now? Divided in 2 sections, otherwise known as the strands of hair. Since we're not drawing every strand, this is more of the illusion of strands. Here are some samples. As you can see, the segments in red are what I call sections. Now for the hair ends. The basics for hair ends is to actually not think of the end. Think of it as where the sections meet on the other side. Speaking of connections, do you remember that failed relationship you had? Stop wallowing in self-pity. Start drawing to wash away the pain. Get better with the Huion Kamvas 22 Plus and the K20. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Yep, this is a sponsored segment. Thank you again, Huion, for sending me this tablet, and here's the unboxing video. This is me struggling to get the stand right. This is the biggest tablet I've ever had and have ever seen, I think, in my entire life. So this was really cool to build. So yeah. Once I got the stand fixed, I did my traditional pen spinning and opened the K20. The K20 is the remote for the tablet, which you can set the different buttons to different shortcuts, and it's really helpful. Also, when you open it, there's like this sticker sheet, which I really thought was just like for cutesies, so I put it with my stickers, and I just realized that you can just put it on top of the buttons so that you won't get lost. But anyways, this is me trying out the tablet. It's so smooth, and I think it was just a surreal experience because I haven't seen a screen this big. The imposter syndrome was kicking in. Didn't know if I deserved this, but thank you again, Huion, for sending me this tablet. As always, the pros and cons are listed in the description below. Okay, back to the hair. So this time we're gonna talk about the coloring. One thing you should know before getting into this is that detail is an illusion, a trick used to deceive you. Let me show you. You think this is neat, right? But when you zoom in, you can see all the little mistakes. Look at those sketch lines. The thing is, if you spend so much time with the details, you won't see it either way when you zoom out. Details are more visible when you don't try too hard. And it's not only me who does this. Let's look at line view for example. If you zoom in, you can notice all their sketch lines. But if you zoom out, you won't even see it. Also, a tip for hair texture is that the shadow dictates the form of the hair. Curly hair has more texture and grit than straight hair. And locks and twists are usually shaded per strand to give more variety. What I do to shade hair is I usually leave the light part of it with less details, so all the section lines are more pronounced in the dark areas. That's just for the viewer's eyes to be less busy and focus on the subject. To do art is to learn balance. Putting too much detail will sometimes waste your efforts because it makes the piece too busy. To start coloring hair, I fill in the sketch with the base color. Once I have the base color, I just find the shadow by going down and diagonal from the original color. Now here's a fun trick. Watch me shade this in real time. Anyways, as you can see, it's supposedly quick to block out the shadows. But how did I do that? First, we have to understand where our light source is coming from. Since I chose one at the top right, the part in the shadows are the parts where the light can't reach. This is more of a problem-solving routine I do. I go over the parts and say, would this make sense for the light to hit that area, or will it be blocked out by an object? Of course, you can just ball. Second step is to get the darker shade of the shadow. I use this to outline the edges of our original shadow. Then I color pick the skin and airbrush it over the areas that are closest to the face. This gives the hair a more reflective look, as if the light is bouncing from the skin back to the hair. Now I add ambient light. This is just a shade of blue that has a value close to your shadow color. A reminder for ambient light is that sometimes it just won't work if you do it wrong. Here's an example. This shade of blue is prominent, but it still works despite it being so blue. It doesn't look too disturbing. That's because the value of this blue is almost the same value as its original shadow. How about this one? It's also blue, but why doesn't it look right? That's because the value of this blue isn't close to the original shadow color. It matches more with the light part actually. Also, if you want to check the values of your colors, just make a new layer, paint it white, and change the blend mode to color. After you add ambient light, there's also a part where you add back saturation in the light areas. Since there's a lack of detail in the light areas, we compensate that by adding saturation. Like the shadow, you can also add any color here as long as it's the same value as the original color. I also like to add a bit of blue to balance it out. I also go back in to add blotches of the colors that we just laid out. To do this, I color pick the colors and just add blobs. Next is coloring the line art. I usually color the light area to a more saturated color. Then after this, I merge the layers after I make sure to have a copy of the file. Okay, this is the basic concept of coloring hair, but to make it look better, time to render it. So first, check to see if you're content with the contrast between the shadows. If not, then you can always adjust it by making either your shadow darker or the lights lighter, which is what I did here. If you're a traditional artist, you probably know the term underpainting, which if you don't know, it's a technique used to add more pop to your piece. What I'm doing here is basically using the original layer as the underpainting. So I'm not even gonna erase or redo it, I'm just gonna paint over it. I also add more of the darker shadow to add more oomph to the depth. You know, now the hair looks more dimensional. I'll also go back into the parts close to the skin and add more blotches to make it more reflective. And I also add some of the skin color into the line art to make the hair blend less to the skin. At this point, I was just unsatisfied of how incomplete it looked, so I rendered the skin and the eyes. Now at this point, it's pretty much done, but I was unsatisfied with how busy it looked, so I went back and just obliterated it, and usually people get triggered when I do this, but it kind of helps you let go of your perfectionism because not everything will look better if you keep adding on to it, so it might be better for you to just go back in and redo some parts. I ended up removing some of the sections and just focused more on the depth and shape of the hair, and that's pretty much it. I also went back and put the light source of the skin because I forgot, but yeah, that's how I draw and color hair. Just to summarize everything, we talked about the Chronicle 1, which is the skull, line confidence, and simplify. Then the breakdown of the hair, which is the hairline, hair part, flow, front end, back end, sections, and hair ends. And then the coloring, which was the base color, shadow, darker shadow, airbrush the skin tone, add ambient light and saturation, color the line art, and render. So yeah, thank you again for getting this far. I hope it helped because I'm worried I won't. If you have any more tips that I may have missed, feel free to drop it in the comments. Bye!